All right, all right. I want to thank everybody for coming in tonight. Like I said, tonight we want to have a good, honest conversation. This conversation, like we said, is not here to bash the police. It's to uplift our brothers, to get understanding. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Dr. Heath, director of the Men's Achievement Center and the African American Male Initiative. And our goal here tonight is to uplift our brothers, man, and just have a real dialogue about what's going on in the streets, what's going on in the community, on campus, and find out ways that we can build our community without bringing our brothers down. And so I have a dynamic panel with us tonight, and I'm gonna let them introduce themselves. And fellas from the panel, just be authentic tonight and just tell the young men and the audience whatever you feel is on your heart. Like I said, we're not here to judge you. And so we'll kick it off with introductions from Mr. Williams. I'll let him go first, and then followed by Jason, Mr. Brown, and my colleague, Mr. Andrews, can introduce himself. All right.
Sounds good. I hope everybody can hear me okay. I'm Damon Williams. I am the Chief of Police and Director of Public Safety here at North Carolina Central University. Of course, I'm charged with helping our community protect the nest, so I'm proud to be here. I'm a Fayetteville State University graduate. I'm also the second vice president of the North Carolina Chiefs of Police Association. I sit on several of our state panels here throughout the state. So I try to represent the Eagles across the state of North Carolina and the IACP across the country. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to an open dialogue tonight.
All right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Armstrong. I'm the police chief here in Ferguson, Missouri. So a few of you may have heard of Ferguson in the past. We are a little famous for some things. I've been here in Ferguson coming up on 2 years. As you can see in the background, I got my flag flying, graduate North Carolina Central University class of 2001. And so, man, I participate in these panels, all over the country, because it's a conversation that needs to be had. It's important information that we need to talk about and that we need to share. And so I'm always looking to lend my voice and my experiences to that dialogue. And so looking forward to tonight.
All right. Mr. Brown.
Dr. Robert Brown, Chair of the Criminal Justice Department at North Carolina Central University. Officer, but I specialize in policing. I do training and evaluation and research for departments, and I specialize in behavior.
All right, thank you for your expertise tonight, Mr. Brown.
All right, my name is Sean Andrews. I'm the coordinator for the African American Male Initiative. And I just want to say I appreciate this conversation. It's much needed. And I look forward to go ahead and getting it underway.
So as we kick this off, as a black man growing up in the neighborhood, you learn that early on that and these falsehoods, like the police are out to get you, you learn to be scared of the police at an early age. And I remember seeing cop cars and you say, there go 5-0, and you're running and you're getting on your porch, making sure that you're safe. And those are just things that are passed down in our community. So I want to ask the panel, and we'll start off with Mr. Armstrong. Why did you become an officer? What was that made you say, this is the career path I want to take for my life?
A couple reasons. So for one, man, when I was coming up, high school, getting into college, man, that's when the first Bad Boys movie came out. And man, no, you couldn't tell me that wasn't Will Smith, Mike Lowry from Bad Boys, man. So just as cool and as smooth as he was, like, man, I locked into that, like, man, that could be me. Man, the first police job I actually applied for was down in the Miami area. Like, I was going to go to Miami in the whole nine, man, because, hey, I was Mike Lowry. But what did it for me and what actually got me into the profession, when I was coming out of Central, there was a program that the federal government was doing at the time, and it was called the Police Corps. Mm-hmm. It was called the Police Corps, and what it was, and so this is 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, the federal government recognized that there was a problem with law enforcement and minority communities. And so they put this program together. So 20 years ago, having a college degree was not something that you typically saw from a police officer. That wasn't a part of the profession. Primarily, you know, coming into policing, you were coming out of the military, or it was in your family, you know, in your family tree. And that's how you got into the profession. You didn't see a lot of college educated individuals joining police departments. And so what the program was, is they were trying to get college educated individuals to join police departments to go to work in these, you know, predominantly minority communities, to see if that could better their relationships. And if you had somebody that was better educated, maybe they could deal with people better. And so the way that they did the program is it was almost like a reverse scholarship. And so I got $30,000 for doing that program to become a police officer for 4 years. That was my agreement, was to be a police officer for 4 years, and they would give me $30,000 that I had already spent on college to do that. And so, you know, man, coming out of school and being broke, man, your whole life and your whole career, you know, man, I'm like, shoot, man, they give me $30,000, man, and all I got to do is do this for 4 years, and that could get me some experience, and I can go on and do, you know, bigger and better things. Like, that was the appeal that really got my attention, was the program that I found out about and that I got into. And like I said, that was 20 years ago. And so I only planned on doing 4 years when I started. And then I was, you know, I wanted to go to the FBI, go do something cool that I saw on TV. But once I got into the profession and I started, you know, learning things and seeing how things really work, and learning, you know, man, all the running and gunning that you see on the TV shows is not reality. And I found my niche, you know, in the police department, you know, then, you know, that just spurred my career on. But for me, it really was just a interest, you know, in what I saw, and just how captivated I was, you know, from watching things and movies and such, which at one point I like to bring up, man, I was that same kid, man. I remember running from the police, you know, when I was young and all of that stuff. And people think that just because we do the profession that we didn't have those same experiences growing up, which, you know, we did. And that's a part of why we need more individuals, you know, that have that experience and those life experiences coming into the profession, you know, so we can connect with people through shared life experiences, man. And that's what it's all about.
Good stuff. So we'll go to Chief. Your turn. Chief Wilson.
I had the complete opposite experience. So I hated the police. Okay, I went to Phillips State University. My goal was to be assistant United States attorney. I was going to lock as many cops as I could. I hated the police, right? And I challenged every one of my police professors. They knew I hated the police. So when it came time to do my internship, they required that I do my internship with a local police department as a practical joke in my mind. And so they sent me to do my internship program. Dr. Brown, you probably can relate to this a little bit, but they sent me to do my internship with the Hope County Sheriff's Office. And I did it with two brothers, Deputy Simple and Deputy Walker. They did police work the way I've never seen police work done in my life, you know. And so I watched these two guys. We'd be riding in the car and they see people out on the porch. They just stop and start having a conversation. Next thing you know, the conversation turns into a piece of chicken and a glass of tea. And by the time we leave that house, we've gotten all the information that we needed about all the drug houses down the street and everywhere else. But I saw these guys interacting with the community, and I thought, well, my God, that ain't how the police are supposed to operate. And needless to say, by the time of riding with these two brothers from Hope County, I mean, I had the bug. At that point, I was like, now that's how I want to do police work. That's the relationship I want to have. And so, you know, I graduated from Federal State, went to the academy. And you know, I became, unfortunately, I went to work for the school system down in Southern Florida. I went to work part-time at Federal State as a police officer, got a full-time job at a local municipality. And within like a year of me getting a full-time position, they fired the police chief. And I never forget the day the mayor walked in and said, he said, "Hey, Williams." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You got a college degree, don't you?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You're the new acting police chief until I hire somebody." And that was 15 years ago. And I always, it was 15 years ago, literally, I got thrown into this seat. But I love what I do because of those two deputies in Hope County. And this is what I express to my people is that, listen, you can change the mindset of anybody by how you operate. because nobody hated the police. But brother, I was more of this than anybody else that you ever met in your life. And so because of those two deputies who I eventually got to thank for their service, but they completely changed what I do, and that's how I got into it.
Good stuff, Mr. Brown. I want to know. So you haven't been a foreign officer, but what made you get into the field as a chair of the Criminal Justice Department on the campus of North Carolina Central University, and knowing that criminal justice is one of the biggest majors within the HBCU universities? You know, what made you get into it, and how did you get where you are?
I'm going to show my age a little bit. So I was a child of the 80s and early 90s. I walked around. I was a political science major. Although I had law enforcement officers in my family, all you would hear from me is cops exist to serve, protect, or break brothers' necks. I hated the cops. My story is similar to what Chief Williams talked about. And I was all into the Black Panthers. I was living that hip hop life as far as my perspective of crime and justice. And I wanted to get into criminal justice to put the fire to judge out there. I actually ended up releasing Scholar because, or should I say, after doing a ride along, when I saw policing from the inside, as close as an insider can get without being a law enforcement officer, I developed a different perspective of the field. I realized, number one, I could not be a police officer because I could not handle the disrespect that many officers experience. I'm a child of the 80s and starter jackets. I remember the days where somebody looked at you wrong, you would fight. I could not imagine being a law enforcement officer with the disrespect that they experience, the comments that people make, people spitting at officers, people saying certain things, glaring officers down. And I realized that, people of color and poor people need good police more than anybody else. And eventually I decided to dedicate my life and my time to, hey, how can I study this, better understand this? How can I help people get into this profession and be the kind of officers that we need, be the kind of officers that people of color and poor people need to experience. So I had a transformation from seeing the problem and having a lot of negative feelings and experiences to getting on the inside and understanding, yeah, this is a little more complex. And if we are not a part of the solution, what hope do we have for things improving?
And I'll say that my background, I was a civilian with the Durham Police Department. I worked at the gang unit for about 2 years in Durham. And I worked for a company. We worked with gang-involved youth. And so they were cool with me, but Durham Police gave me an undercover car, right? And it's like, you want me to work with gang-involved youth, but you want me to drive around in an undercover car and show up at these young men's house, And I was like, they were trying to recruit me to be an officer. And I thought about it, but I was like, you want me to help these young men, but you know what happens if I pull up in his house in an undercover car, what that looks like for him in the street. And so we battled with that, and I ended up leaving the job because I just felt like they had a good plan, but they wasn't orchestrating it the way I wanted to do. And so for me, going in there, I didn't see a lot of Black officers, but when I did see the Black officers interact with each other, I seen the camaraderie that they had. And so you guys as officers, sometimes you being the only Black male on unit, sometimes just being in these spaces. Have you ever experienced racism within, or how do you guys handle that when there's a shooting and it's wrong and you say, but as officers, I know you sworn to back your brothers in blue, and how does that affect you as a Black man, knowing that you're on both sides? You go in those neighborhoods and the family's crying and they cussing the cops out, and it's like, you're a sellout. And how do you handle all that pressure and just walk with your head up and go in those spaces like that? Anybody can take it.
Man, I'll jump in on this one. And so with the first part, as far as, you say if there's a shooting or whatnot, and if the shooting is bad. If the shooting is bad, the shooting is bad. I mean, there is no well, I got to call it good because, I'm a police officer or what have you. Now, the biggest thing that happens, and I was in a training class earlier today and we got to talking about this. So I'm that guy for my family and friends of when these things happen, I'm getting the text, I'm getting the phone calls. Jay, man, what happened with this, man? Was that good? Was that bad? Or why did they do this? Why did they do that? The issue is majority of the time, the snippet that we see on the news does not give us the information that we need from a professional basis for me to say, yes, that was a justified shooting or that was not a justified shooting, because we normally don't have enough information to make that determination. And I will tell people that, and I will explain, why that is. And you saw something different last year with George Floyd, because with George Floyd, we saw everything that we needed to see. And very rarely do we have all of that. And that's why you saw just so many law enforcement executives and officials from around the country, condemning, what happened with that incident, because we saw everything that we needed to see. And so if I review something and it's bad, I'm not co-signing on that. Hey, I will have a conversation, with my people about it, and hey, let's toss it around. Let's talk about it, and I want to hear what others have to say about it, because hey, I need to make sure that we all on the same page and we all understand how our policies and procedures, guide our actions and what we do. Now, as far as the abuse that we take, man, that's just one of the things, man. Over 20 years of doing this, man, you build up the thick skin to deal with it. And man, you really just have to compartmentalize the fact that, man, it's not Jason Armstrong that they hate. Okay, man, they hate this uniform that I'm wearing. They hate this badge that I carry and what it represents to them. And it's part of my job, it's part of my responsibility to show them something different from where the hatred comes from. And that just goes to, man, me just trying to be, personable and just trying to be a human, to other people and show that example for the individuals that I work with also. Man, I was at a homicide scene last month and so we had the area taped off and you had family members that still were responding to the scene. And so, man, they've gotten a phone call that one of their loved ones has been killed, and the body is still there. We're still out there because we got to come get all the crime scene stuff. And so, man, that's the only thing that they're thinking. And so you see, so if there's not an officer standing there at the tape, man, people are going to walk underneath that tape because they're trying to get to the house. And so somebody walked on the tape, and so one of my officers starts like, "Oh, no, stop." And I'm like, all right, it's cool, man. We can tell them to stop, but we don't have to be disrespectful in how we do that. Yes, they did walk past the tape, but we don't have to yell, hey, dummy, did you see that tape? Man, they're distraught, man. They're dealing with trauma right now. Man, there's a better way that we can handle that. And so, man, I go over there and it's like, no. And I go explain to them, hey, we're taking scans of the scene and all of this stuff. Man, I know you want to get in there with your family. As soon as we can get you in there, I promise we'll get you in there. But for right now, I need you to stay outside this area right here. And you model what the expectation is. And so I'm doing that in front of my officers so they can see and we can have a conversation afterwards. Like, all right, man, that's how I expect that to be handled. Those are the things that I want to see. And, we have to model that despite, man, some of the, the viciousness that we take, for being a Black person doing this profession, and all the Uncle Toms and all the sellouts, that we're called is trying to work through that. And man, I'm not going to sugarcoat and say that it's easy, every day. And I've said some things to some people like, man, bro, don't let this uniform fool you. Like, hey, I'm still a man. I'm still a man, inside this space. And so, man, don't me like that. Just to be trying to show me up because you think I can't do anything about it. Like, man, there's a way to go about those things, man, and you just keep it with people.
Still, brother. So,
hey, Tim, I heard it.
I got someone who wants a question to a follow up, and then I'm gonna come to you. So we're gonna unmute them right quick. They got a question, Ernie. So, hold on. Go ahead with your question.
Can you hear me?
Dory, yeah. We hear you.
Jason, sir. Okay. Just follow-up question. I agree that most people don't see the man, they see the uniform. But being an older individual, and I grew up in Miami, spent a lot of time in New York. I come from a different area where cops lived in the neighborhoods. They walked the beat, so you knew who that officer was. And most times you would either have grandma or, your tias, talking to the officers. They knew, everybody knew who did that. But we've kind of migrated away from that, with officers almost becoming like an occupying force. You don't have that daily interaction at the newsstand, at the fruit stand, at the neighborhood store that you used to have. Is there any way that, or do you see any trend going back to that community involvement with their part, where they don't live in another community and then just come in with the rover and then go back? That was my question, sir.
Man, we do see some movement of trying to get back to that, but here there are a couple challenges to that. And so, all right, here in the St. Louis area, St. Louis City Police Department, for decades, they've had a rule that you could not be a police officer for them if you did not live in the city. And so it was a requirement, it was a mandate for all the officers that they had to live in the city. But the problem that you run into is, man, if that city doesn't provide the resources and the amenities that you seek for yourself, then that becomes a conflict for you. And so if the school system in that city is not good, all right, man, I don't want to live there and send my kids, to the schools if I can live somewhere else and give my kids a better education. So it's things like that. Some cities, take a New York City, like it's expensive as all get out to live in New York City. And so that's always a challenge, for officers coming out, the pay is not equivalent to what the cost of living is, in a city. And so how do you balance that out? And so, they just recently changed that rule for St. Louis because, the command staff was just making an argument like, man, we're shrinking our talent pool by just restricting ourselves to only be able to have people, that live in the city, because some people just don't want to live in the city. And, and I've done both. So, working here in Ferguson, I live here in Ferguson. So I live in a community that I could walk to work, if I chose to do so. And, there are pros and cons to doing that. But the biggest thing is, even if that person is coming from somewhere else, man, what investment are they making in that city for those 8 hours or 12 hours that they're there? And you can have somebody that lives in the city, man, but they don't give you a quality investment for those 8 hours or those 12 hours. And so, for me, that's what's most critical. But the change in the dynamic of how we handle things is now, man, this era of police, man, we've been driven by data. And we've been driven by, how fast does it take from when we get the phone call to how quick we get to the location of where the problem is. And so it's a lot easier for us to get there if the officers are in their car most of the time, as opposed to if they get out and they walk 5 blocks away from their car, but now they got to respond to a call. That's cutting down on response times because they got to get back to their car and they have to get there. And so we're more spread out, and it's become more about visibility for the entire area than, shrinking areas and building those relationships, in the areas. And so, man, what we're trying to do now is create models where we can adjust how we're responding to things. Because like here in Ferguson, we're a small city, but we handled over 30,000 calls last year. And so it's just, we're so busy that officers don't have the time to get out and do those things that we know need to be done. And so we have to make some changes, and we have to shift in how we're doing our day-to-day response and our day-to-day activity, so we can get back to more of those, building those relationships that we know work. It's just, man, the amount of activity has increased, and a lot of times, man, our funding and things, have not increased at that same rate. And so we don't have as many officers as we would like to have to be able to do those things.
So Mr. Williams, I want you to follow up with that question, or follow up on the first question I asked about the racism experience as an officer. I'll let you take this one, and then I'm gonna have a follow up for you, and then Mr. Brown, I got a question for you next. All right, Mr. Brown, you want to say something? You want to follow up? Go ahead.
I do. This and many of the forums we have are conversations but I always want to emphasize that we're on a college campus, and there's a science, there's knowledge behind men, and it's been a part of their rise. What you're talking about is this concept that was coined in 19. Police officers are not fully accepted within the profession because they're not white, and once they become police officers, they're not fully accepted in the community because they're perceived to be blue. So I want to note that, because for criminal justice majors on this call, or for some who might want to study this some more, there are books about the does it need to be black and blue at the same time, and in either world.
All right. Mr. Williams, I'll let you take the floor.
So I've had a chance to be a municipal police officer. I've been a municipal police chief in 2 major cities, and one of the last cities I was in, when I got there, the diversity in the police department was 4%. When I left, it was 35%. And here's the issue, though. It was a fight the whole way to get that diversity up, right? There were people outright saying I was hiring too many black people in the police department. So the question is, also, is does systemic racism still exist in the police department? Of course it does. Of course it does. The one thing I can say as a chief, I'm able to affect change from the top. And I tell a lot of our brothers when they come in law enforcement, listen, now you're on the inside, you get to show how to do it right. You get to see that wrong and help weed it out. And so that's been a role that I've taken. I've been the first black chief in 2 agencies. And when I walked in to one agency, it was me and one other person. And so you can imagine, everybody else got buzz cuts. There's this atmosphere of zero tolerance, and I got to come in and change the whole thing. I literally picked it up and shook it upside down. And I remember telling officers at one point in time, I get it. You might not like the new captain of the ship. All I say is jump off the ship before the ship pulls out the ocean, and don't have me throw you off. Because we are going to do policing a different way. We are going to do intelligence-led policing. We are going to do community policing. We are going to get out there and interact with our community. Because let me tell you something. In one of my cities where I had 92 officers protecting 50,000 people, that ratio doesn't match, right? And so the way we do that effectively is to get 50,000 people to protect 50,000 people. That means we got to build relationships in the community. We got to get out there with them one-on-one. We got to build those relationships. We got to hit it from the ground up and bring everybody on board. And one of the things I will say is it's important for a police department to have diversity across the spectrum. I remember sitting and listening to 2 of my officers have a discussion. One of them was talking about the guy, why do the white guys have the big loop earrings and the spiky hair and the black fingernail polish? He couldn't understand that. And in this conversation, I heard the other guy say, well, man, I don't get why the guys sag their pants. What's that all about? They're having a cultural conversation to understand those cross-cultural boundaries. And what's going to happen is they're going to interact with those cultures out in the community. So it's important. Do we get the negativity from both sides? Yeah, I get it from the black community and the white community sometimes. Is that tough? Yeah. And like Chief Armstrong said, you got to have some thick skin, but we also carry it day to day.
So with that being said, I worked at another university. I won't say the university. And so they had a white officer. They called him the Wolf. So the Wolf was like, when there was drugs, whatever, something going on, when I say he would come to the scene and he would totally disrespect these young boys on campus. You being an officer of a campus and you hiring white officers, how do you keep that street mentality of the officers off the campus? Being, these are college students. Yeah, they may have some marijuana. And how do you not saying that college students get a break, but how do you teach your officers like this is not the street, right? This is still a campus.
Oh yeah.
How do you separate that?
So first and foremost, it's who I hire. I'm not looking for a warrior on a college campus. I'm looking for a guardian. I'm looking for somebody who can come in here and look and seek to see our students be successful, right? And so, and the second part is holding people accountable. Accountability is huge in the police department. Here at NCCU, we reinstituted body cameras, and we instituted the PEW system, which is our personnel early warning system. So we're looking for those kind of people who don't belong here, and we're encouraging those who do to intervene. But it's all about the kind of people that you bring on board. You got to look for that person that has that guardian mentality here. Don't get me wrong. This job is 10% warrior, 90% guardian. I spend most of my days counseling, offering that hand up to help somebody be successful. or to get them the help that they need. I'm not a mental health professional, but every day I feel like a counselor. Every day I feel like a mental health professional because I'm going to do whatever it takes to make sure that our students graduate, make sure they reach their goals. And I'm going to be that support system along with the other support systems here in this university. So if I do have an officer that comes to work here and they don't meet that same standard, they can't stay here. And I make it clear. If you want to stay on this ship, then you got to understand the expectations and understand that you're going to be held accountable for your actions going forward.
Good. So that leads to a question. So the young man, he brought up community policing, right? And so I want you guys to discuss, and Mr. Brown, I want you to give us a research aspect of that. What are the strengths and weaknesses of community policing and training, and what are some things we can do to improve that? And I have this notion is, you talked about 50,000 people saving 50,000 people. How do we start some kind of alliance within the neighborhood where you train other males in the community to work with the police department, but not officers, but they kind of like the people in the neighborhood? Do you see that even being that we can implement within the police department? So, when I have you, I'll go to you and Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Brown.
So first and foremost, you got to get out of that car a little bit more, and you got to interact with people. You got to do everything you can to make a connection, right? And so, and number one, as an administrator, I got to know where my people's strengths are. I got to know that guy that I might have in the wrong position. For example, I got a guy on the traffic team, but he's a community guy. Why do I have him on the traffic team? No, I need to put him out in the community. I need to have him out building those relationships. So I got to put my resources where my best skills are, number one. But it takes all of us to build a relationship. But community policing is not a program. It has to be a philosophy inside the police department. It has to be a mindset. It has to start with a mission from the top going down, and it has to be driven. And accountability has to be a part of that at the same time. So the community has to trust that if they do have an issue with an officer, they can come to the police department, and the police department is going to resolve the issue. We need to be transparent about it. And we know we have some rules and regulations in North Carolina that prevents a certain level of transparency in law enforcement, but it doesn't make it impossible for that law enforcement executive to go and unlock that transparency. You've seen Raleigh do it. You've seen Winston-Salem do it. In my opinion, that's how we do it. It has to be a groundswell within the agency. It can't be a program. I've talked to agencies where we have a community policing program, 2 officers to go out and do community policing. Nah, in my last agency, all 92 officers were tasked with the same charge. We all wore a pin that says impact on it. So every morning when they put their uniform on, they were reminded of what the ultimate goal was of that day. That was a form of relationship to help build that bond and strengthen that relationship between the community and the police. So we had built up so much positive equity that when something negative did happen, people understood that we were going to do the right thing from the beginning, because they didn't know Officer Swallow as Officer Swallow. They know him as Big Swell. You know what I'm saying? Because he's out there playing basketball. He's engaging them. He's out there having lunch. You know, 3 days a week, I would go to the school, the local high school, and choke down some lunch with the students. I didn't sit with the teachers. I sat with the students. I interacted with them. I see the teachers every day. I'm going to interact with those students. Well, what happens? Those students go home and talk to their parents. Say, hey, Chief, put up lunch with the chief today. He's pretty cool. Then now you're talking to parents. Now I'm having those open conversations. And dialogues like this are important. The fact that we can confront. If someone has a question and they want factual answers on a police issue, here's the place to come get it. Chief Armstrong is going to give you the facts. I'm going to give you the facts. We're going to tell you the truth, right? We're not going to lie to you. I get it. You may not like the truth sometimes, but we're going to give you facts. We're not going to give you innuendo.
Yes. Mr. Armstrong?
Yeah, and so when we talk about community policing, man, I think as a whole in law enforcement, man, we've missed the mark because of the social media age that we live in. And so you see, man, a lot of agencies, man, they posting all of these pictures, at events and stuff, and they call that community policing, but like they not meeting anybody, they not having any real serious conversations, like they not getting to the root of any of the problems, or any of the issues. And so, when we talk about community policing, man, like Chief Williams said, man, it's always going to be a lot more community members than there are police officers. And so there is no way we can do this job effectively and efficiently by ourselves or on our own. And so, and so some of that comes to, not always telling the community members what they want to hear. Like, that's not helping anybody. Just come into something and tell them something that they want to hear. Man, we got to be open and we got to be honest with them. And we have to explain to them, man, what their role is in this, because we all carry a level of accountability and responsibility on. And so as a neighborhood, If you know who's selling drugs, on your street, and you don't want to do anything about it, and then somebody comes and shoots that house up because somebody that they beefing with, but now you want to come yell at me and yell at us because, well, y'all didn't do anything about them shooting up, and they've been selling drugs for all of this time. Well, has that been communicated to us at all? And if it hasn't been, then, all right, yes, it's our responsibility to deal with the incident that has happened. But, all right, man, the community members, man, y'all carry some of this accountability also, man, because, you all have empowered them to do it because they knew nobody's going to say anything about them doing it. And so it's having those conversations with the community also to where we're explaining, man, how the community members can help us help them. And that's what we get to, man, when we talk about community policing, man.
That'll be hard, in the Black community. We have that no snitching in the hood. That's one of the worst things to kind of hamper the Black community. And I talk to my guys about it a lot. So good input, Mr. Brown. I want you to bring it from that research side, or is there issues with the training, or how can we better community policing? What are you teaching your students in class about this?
So first, both chiefs are spot on. Community police, and this is an awesome question and a big question, and I'm gonna really try not to go for as long as we can talk on it. We have been talking about community policing for approximately 40 years now, and there are over 17,000 different law enforcement agencies in our country, and there are arguably different versions of. A big problem we have is community policing means something differently in one agency versus another. Chief Williams as first spoke to it. You can have an agency where community policing is a top-down philosophy that is trained and practiced by everyone, and you could have a jurisdiction right next door where there are a couple of officers who have a title of community policing officers. They go around and do certain things, and both agencies are credited as engaging in community policing. So this fundamental problem, definitional problem, turns into a fundamental problem of practice. And if you do not have all officers in your agency practicing community policing, whatever it means, then you have a jurisdiction where people are policed where if they encounter Officer Williams, they might get one response. But if they encounter Officer Armstrong in the same agency, they may get another response because they are assigned different roles versus philosophy. From a research perspective, overwhelmingly Black officers, all our research indicates that they subscribe to the philosophies and practices of community more so than white officers. But we have a very, very, very big problem. And I'm going to make this my last point. Community policing did not just get rid of arrests. Community policing did not get rid of law enforcement. So since community policing has been more of an add-on to the way law enforcement was working up through the 1970s and early 80s, we have this misconception that, the police are going to be a part of the community and do all of these touchy-feely things, and all of the harder aspects of policing are somehow not. So when you go into training, you can train officers to be guardians, but if you are also going to maintain the warrior mantle, community policing stops when it's a serious critical incident. I'll end.
Good stuff. So I have to spin the question. So with the recent George Floyd, the young man that just was shot in Missouri, St. Louis, I think it was St. Louis. Maybe I'm calling the state wrong. But these recent shootings, do we have a problem with Black officers and Black men? And how do we get more Black men into the law enforcement field and make them feel comfortable? Do you guys see that as a tricky, slippery slope that can't happen, or does it start with our new generation of young Black males and young Black ladies? And so we'll start off with Mr. Williams, then we go to Armstrong.
So I think one of the things that, as a member of the North Carolina Teachers Police Association, is we push for our members to get out and talk with some of our HBCUs. Go out. They're not going to fall in your lap. You got to go out and find them. You got to go out and show them that you're doing policing a different way. That it's a different style. It's a different day in policing. And so yes, it's difficult to recruit young African American males into law enforcement when what they see every day is what they see on the news, or that's all they know about law enforcement. Or if their particular police department hasn't been doing law enforcement the right way and they've seen the injustices on a regular basis. You have to get out there and you got to employ them. You got to show them there's a different way to do it. We can only make a difference when we demonstrate how to do police work right. I mean, I keep going back to myself because, I mean, I hated the police. I hated the police. I grew up in Baltimore, Fayetteville, and back then the police was not something I loved at all. Those were the two examples I had of policing. So needless to say, you can imagine, my mother would never thought that I'd have been a law enforcement officer. That was the last thing I would have been. So, but it took two impressive law enforcement officers to completely change that model just because I saw them do it the right way. I saw them do it the right way over a length of time. And so, is it tough? Yes, it's tough to do it, but they're not falling on our laps. We got to go out and we got to get them. We got to show them we're willing to do law enforcement different, and they can be part of that change to help us bring it along.
And to piggyback, off what Chief Williams, just elaborated on, is one thing I don't do when I talk to young people, especially, we're talking about young minorities coming in this profession, is, man, I don't sugarcoat how difficult it's going to be, especially if you're coming into an agency that does not have much diversity in it. And that's what happened with me when I started out in Georgia. Man, my police department didn't have much diversity in it. And so it wasn't much diversity in the police department, and there was no diversity in upper leadership. And so, when I was promoted to lieutenant, I was the first Black lieutenant that the department had. And as I went up, captain, and I ended up at the interim police chief at one point in time. And so there were a lot of things that I wasn't allowed to do, that the agency wasn't comfortable with anyone doing, because it was different. And I was coming from a different lane and from a different space. And so, if I wanted to host an event like this, I was told no. They wouldn't sign off on it because they were uncomfortable with what that may look like and some of the things that may be brought up. And I'm like, yo, man, like, all right, I get it. Strengths. Use me if you're not comfortable coming, then don't come. But just because you're not comfortable coming doesn't mean that we don't need to have that conversation, or somebody doesn't need to have it. And so a lot of this stuff, man, I wasn't able to do until I became the doggone chief. Then there was nobody to tell me no. And I'm like, yo, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But people got to see, man, just the positive feedback that we got from that and the positive reaction we got from it. But I had to be very strategic in how I moved to even be able to get to that point. Because, man, I was scared, going through the process that, man, I'm the only Black person in the command staff. And so, man, I got to be careful with how I bring things up, because, man, I can't afford to be labeled the angry Black guy, because they're not going to listen to anything that I got to say. And so, man, this is where partnerships come in, because, man, sometimes I had to go to some of my white counterparts and I had to get them to say something for me, because I knew that they would listen to it coming from them, as opposed to if it came from me. And like, man, that's a hard space to be in sometimes. And that's not an easy road to travel. But, man, when your eyes on the big prize, man, and when you are locked into what is the goal? What is the end game? Do I care about getting the credit for this, or do I care about it being done right? Or do I care about, helping what the mission is? Man, and it's hard for some people to walk, to navigate that space. And I've seen some brothers just get so frustrated that, man, they up and quit, man. I can't roll with this. I can't roll with that. And I get it. But hey, man, if the end game is to impact or have that impact, that change that we want to see, man, we got to have some people, man, that are willing to sign up, man, and go to battle for this. Uh-oh.
Can I chime in real quick? So, I go back to something, and Chief Armstrong, you hit on it there for me that you reminded me of. When I came into an agency where the diversity was 4%, and I talked about changing the policing model so that we can better have a relationship with communities, some communities in the city. I remember being accused by some of my white counterparts of turning the department into the Department of Social Services, all because we were no longer doing zero tolerance. So I had to fight them on the inside. I had to fight politics at City Hall on, and this favoritism that this was the mayor's buddy and this was, I've known this person for 20 years, while also trying to implore diversity to look at my department and come be a part of this. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge for law enforcement executives. And in North Carolina, the average lifespan for a chief in the agency is 3 to 5 years. And I talked about that. Me and Chief Armstrong were on another panel a day or two ago. Mm-hmm. And I kept saying, listen, politics gets involved in what we do every day too many times. If you will leave Chief Armstrong, myself, other police administrators to do the job that we were hired to do, guess what? We weed out your bad cops. And if we're the problem, weed us out there. But we would weed out those individuals. We would rid our department of some of those infestations that are causing some of the issues inside of these police departments. But that's not the case always. Like I mentioned in the last panel, there have been times where I recommended the termination of an officer and I was completely overruled because this person was the mayor's buddy. And so you get those type of inclinations that happen inside of police departments, and that's disappointing, but that's the fact.
All right, can't hear you.
Can y'all hear me now?
Yep, got you.
Somehow I got muted. So I wanted to make sure I get these student questions in, but I want you guys to answer this question. You have to be a long question. So after the incident on the Capitol, and you've seen some of your black brothers out there trying to defend, and we've seen how some of them guys were treated when they broke into the Capitol. What were those conversations like when you guys got back to work? And Chief Armstrong, what you did in Missouri, and I know that's a different environment. Like, what was those conversations like? You don't got to go to details, say, was that hard conversations, or was it like silence the next day, everybody looking around like, what just happened? Because you think about it as officers, and, we thinking officers let these guys in, and you had some of the black officers that wasn't informed. Like, what was those conversations like that next day at work, or did you even have them?
Yeah, man, we had a lot of conversations around that, and man, but really, man, it comes back down to your experiences. And so for me, and I watched that stuff happen live. Like once it started and I got the live feed, man, I'm sitting here in my office and I'm watching that stuff unfold live. But it took me to a different place. Man, I'm the chief here in Ferguson. Okay, and so Ferguson is considered ground zero for a lot of people when we talk about unrest and similar arrests and what happened here after Michael Brown. And so now I don't know how much national coverage it got after George Floyd, but after George Floyd, that following weekend, man, people came here to burn down my police department.
Wow.
So that night, man, protests all day long, hundreds of protesters here, man, I was out there with them and we had, a lot of good conversations and man, we made some ground. But when nighttime fell, man, it was a completely different ball game. And I mean, we've been shot at, man, jokers launching rocks and boulders at us. They throwing commercial grade fireworks at us. And so they bust out all the windows of my police department. And they were launching fireworks inside the building, trying to burn it up. Matter of fact, I just got my windows replaced last week. And so when I'm watching that unfold, man, I was in my building when they first started busting out the windows. And so, man, we had, a couple civilian employees here in the building. And I just remember thinking like, man, these jokers are trying to come in and take over. And all right, man, they come in with bats and all this other stuff. And I'm standing there like, all right, man, like, I'm not going out like that. Like, man, if they come in here with this stuff, man, they'll see me and they'll have a chance to make a decision of if they want to come at me to do something or if they want to turn and run away. But like, that's where my mind was. And so I'm watching this stuff unfold at the Capitol and man, I'm just entrenched because I'm thinking about the situation that I was just in months earlier where, man, I'm thinking like, man, are these people trying to come in here to kill me? Because that's how I felt. And so, so a conversation for us here in Ferguson, because of what we deal with, may be a little bit differently than our police department that hasn't had to deal with those things and haven't been through those kind of experiences. But for me, that's what it was. And so, man, the talk was just how crazy, how quickly things unfolded. We know because we live it here. we live it here, and just knowing the feeling of being overwhelmed. Like that night, man, we started. I probably had about 70 officers here at my facility on my property, because we knew we were going to have, just hundreds and hundreds of people coming. But when that attack started, by the end of the night, man, I probably had about 250 officers here. Mm-hmm. And it was just the thing is, man, man, it happens so quick, man. When that match lit, man, it happens and unfolds so quick, man. It's almost like you don't have time to think. And so, man, I can definitely understand how quickly they could be overrun and overwhelmed, by the volume of people. And so for us, the conversation was more so about what our experiences have been here and what we could learn from that and going about, how we would handle a similar situation, because it wouldn't be, far fetched for that to happen to us here in Ferguson.
Mr. Williams, you want to tackle that one, or you good?
Man, I sat here and watched it in disbelief almost. I was just like Chief Armstrong. I sat here in my office and I was just like, whoa, wait a minute. This is totally different. But I can tell you this. Any chief who thinks that response is completely different from a response that those people have been a different ethnicity is a fool. That would have been a different response. It would have been a different level of preparation. So, not much to say about it.
I was angry.
Yeah, listen, let me tell you something. I always get hit. I got a 14-year-old son, and my son, he lives this stuff. He's me 20 years ago. Okay, so every time something happens, he comes, he gives me a call, he shoots me a text, and this is how I find out about stuff. My son will confront me with it, and he was like, "So you think it would have been a different response had they all been Black Lives Matter?" Oh yeah, it'd have been a different response. And, I don't have to ask. It was a different response when Black Lives Matter did come to DC. There was a different response and level of preparation. So, it's just a clear example that we still got issues.
But let me throw this one part in there. Okay, let me throw this part in, and I only bring this up because this is lived experience. Okay. And so one thing to take into account, and I know from the outside looking at it, we can say that, but I just want to make this one point because it was something that I thought about because, like I said, I've experienced it here. And so, man, whenever you have a protest or just a high profile anything happen, very rarely does that event go 100% smooth and good. Okay, there's always some pros and cons. There's always some good takeaways and some bad takeaways. And one thing that I could see happening, I don't know, I haven't talked to anybody that was involved in that initial response and preparation. But when they had the Black Lives Matter protests and everything that happened over the summer and their heavy response to it, there's normally a heavy criticism that comes along with that. There's normally a large criticism that comes along with that. Now, what we don't know, and we'll never get the answer to this question, but I like to bring this up because I like to throw it out there, is I wouldn't be surprised if part of the preparation and part of what went into the decision of how aggressive they were going to be in their initial approach, I wouldn't be surprised if what was factored into that decision was how much negative press and response they got for how aggressive they looked during the previous protests. Now, I know it's a different group. And, man, I know that has some contributing factors to it also. But being somebody who has to deal with protests and deal with that stuff often, that is something that does factor into the conversation, in preparations. And so, man, if we got dragged through the mud for looking too aggressive, for being this, the previous one, that may influence the next one coming, no matter what the group is. That may influence, man, how, what our tactics looks like the next time. Where case in point, what we lived through that first night, man, when they tore up my building and destroyed my building, we were more open and welcoming that day. They were in my parking lot, man. I was out there with them. It was everything. But when they tore up my building, when they came back the next day, my parking lot was off limits. And nah, man, y'all not stepping foot in my parking lot today because I let y'all come in yesterday, man, and y'all took advantage of it and y'all destroyed the building. And so, so some of it is a buildup, and that could have been. I'm not saying that it was, but that could have been something that was a contributing factor.
I don't know, man. 'Cause those intel reports that were coming out prior to that event were pretty damning. I mean, even we were getting them on a local level across the association, across the state. So I read those intel reports, and I'm looking like, the level of preparation clearly seems different to me. This is just my opinion. It just clearly seems different.
I got you. And no, it was a totally different. It was handled differently.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all agree on that. But I'm just throwing that other piece out there that that could be a contributing factor.
That's good. Look at it. I looked at it. I was watching it with my students, and just to hear them as black men say, "Man, if that would have been us, we'd have been shot, killed." And they're look at the officers out here. So we talked about that. It's like, it is what it is. But like you said, media plays a role in that. So, Mr. Brown, before I open it up to the audience, I'm gonna let them ask you guys some questions. What did you talk to your students about that next day, or do y'all have that conversation in the criminal justice building as a unit?
Because of COVID and the virtual nature of things, it but media through phone calls and texting, everything that's being shared right now, I think that we do need to understand the complex layers going on for things like this. Washington, D.C. is my home. I have retired Capitol police officers, family, and my buddies from high school, talking to them about events. You're talking about a complex situation in probably one of the most complex environments. Washington, D.C. police, they're used to deal with people and allowing people to come and share their perspective on things, similar to what Chief Williams talked about. Campus policing is a bit different from municipal policing. It's a different stakeholders. The capital area, you need to embrace people from across the world, and you're kind of used to dealing with people who are there with their signs and voicing their opinions. So it's not surprising that maybe they took a different approach coming in. It's also not surprising that there was a different response. The on the ground, because of who they were relative to some other people. Things can be true.
Absolutely.
True. So before I open it up, and if you have a question, how we're going to do it, just hit the raise your hand button, and I'll try to go through it as I can. And so we do have a few questions in the chat. Jalen Spooner, let me see if he's still here. Jalen Spooner.
I'm right here, Dr. Eve.
All right, go ahead and ask your question. We'll go to you first. If you had the first question.
Okay. Hello, everyone. So, my question is: so, training for policing has evolved a lot over the years. With practices, policies, and things like that. As the values of our society have changed. So, what do you think is the next step for training policing? We talk a lot about more training dealing with mental health and things like that.
I could take that one. I think the training is a little different state by state. It depends on what state you're in, number one, and what kind of training you receive. But I think a big push in North Carolina is implicit bias, recognizing those biases that we have and knowing how to overcome or at least cope with them. The second step is training our officers with a different mindset. We are training now in North Carolina under our basic law enforcement training program officers to understand more of the guardian mindset and what it means to serve and protect along with that. So those are some of the things that we're pushing. I mean, there are so many different areas we're pushing across North Carolina that we're working on changing within our training program in basic academy, de-escalation, critical incident training, mental health training. I mean, you name it. We're working to get our younger officers and next generation trained up in those areas, because those are the kind of calls we're dealing with that go out just because an officer does not have the proper training and knowing how to deal with those situations as they occur. So those are some of the things that I see here in North Carolina that we're pushing forward.
And the training piece, man, is a real sensitive area for me. because that's always the first thing that gets thrown out whenever there's a problem is, man, that officer needs some more training, or we need to do training. But here's my pushback on that is I'm a very highly intelligent individual. You can put me in any class, no matter what the topic is. I will learn the material and I will pass that class with flying colors. It doesn't mean that it did anything to me. So the example that I use is, man, I could take a class on the KKK. You can send me to a week-long training class on the KKK, and guess what? I'm going to pass that class. Now, me standing here as a black man doesn't mean that I'm going to go join the KKK and I'm going to start thinking like them and I'm going to act like them. No, it doesn't. So when we talk about the implicit bias training that we're doing, man, you have to find training that is impactful, that you can really measure and put into practice, because we have too many people that we send to training classes that they learn the material in the class and they pass a test, but it has no correlation over into real life. And so, the training it's good and it's a good component to it, but that's not the end all be all that we try to make it. And so where you really start to change, especially when we talk about this and we talk about the biases that people have, because we all have biases. Okay. Every last one of us have bias. And so man, we have to create environments that challenge our biases. And so, all right, so if you have a white officer that didn't grow up around any black people and didn't go to school with any black people, and so the only interactions that they have with black people is when they become a police officer, and now they're policing a black community, then, man, and if they're in a high crime area, then that's what their association is, all right, man, blacks are associated with high crime. And so, man, we have to interject, man, for them to have some different experiences with black people in a different space to build up some additional conditioning for them, that they see that, all right, man, all black people, are not associated with crime and related to crime. And so the training, training classes are good, man, but it's more of the practical exposure and experiences that we can give officers, that we can put in front of them to challenge, man, what their, just their normalcy is really, man, where we have to go and what we're trying to do and how we're trying to introduce things to change things. Because, hell, man, we've been doing trainings for years and decades, man, and we keep seeing a lot of the same stuff over and over and over again. And so that tells us that just the training alone is not working.
It's in their heart, huh? It's got to be in your heart. So we have
It has to be, man.
Andre, and we got Dory coming up. So Andre, I'll let you go.
Good afternoon, Mr. Armstrong.
Okay.
I have a question for you. This might seem a little outlandish, but back then, a few minutes ago, you were referencing the community policing. Do you have any sort of protection against those who do report some sort of gang violence or drug distribution? Because from what I know is that, again, with the whole snitching and stitching type of thing, it could be a little bit problematic for them.
Absolutely. And so the first thing is, whenever possible, if somebody provides us with information, we try to keep that information confidential where it came from. And so that's the first, that's the first step in the process is confidentiality. And so, man, I don't care where the information comes from. I just need the information. And so when I talk to people, I'll tell them, we have an email address that people can email us information. So I'll tell people, man, create a fake email address. Man, create a completely bogus email address if you're worried about that. And, just send us some information, anonymously. Man, I don't have a way to track that back to you. So, that's just on providing the information. Now, it's a lot more difficult when we're talking about somebody who is a witness to a crime. So let's say somebody witnesses a murder. OK, now we're in a completely different space. And that's been one of the biggest challenges for law enforcement, is because there haven't been those protections for people. Now, here in Missouri, in the last legislative session that they had, they introduced a bill to provide funding for a kind of a witness protection program. And so that's in the early stages of being looked at to see, man, what that could look like and what could be done. But currently, no, man, we don't have anything, and we're not able to promise anybody or give them that reassurance that if it's something that, man, they would have to come forth and we might be able to keep your identity secret for a certain length of time. But if it's a high profile case that's going in the court, then at some point in time, like, you have to produce your witnesses. And a lot of times, no, we don't have anything in place for that. But if somebody just wanted to provide information on, hey, this house is selling drugs, or this house, man, we know the person that's breaking into all the houses or cars around here live at this address, all of that can be done anonymously. We just need we just need the public's help in pointing us in the right direction, and we can run it up, because we have to do an independent investigation anyway that goes along with that. To confirm the information that we're being given. So the overwhelming majority of the time, man, it can be done anonymously. And like I said, you don't have to give names. You can, create fake email addresses to send us stuff if you wanted to. There are a lot of ways that it could be done where, we're not having to put, people out on Front Street, man, who's talking to us.
Okay, we have Dory up next. I hope I'm saying your name right. If I'm not, I apologize. Go ahead. There you go.
Okay. Yes, sir. You hear me?
Yes.
So my questions, I want to follow up on the training for the panel. So it's actually in two parts. The first part, and I did a lot of work with Broward Sheriffs down in Florida. And it seemed like most of their officers only did any hand-to-hand training just for the cadet school. And then afterwards, unless they got paid for that in service, they were not doing any physical training at all. Very rarely would have an officer come in and do that training. That way there was less lethal encounters in the community. It was, instead of protect and serve, it was your first responsibility was to go home to your family, but not use non-lethal means. So my question is, do you incentivize your officers to find a way, whether it's a jiu-jitsu class or some non-lethal mean, to work within the community so they just don't shoot and they're out, and that's whatever, go to IA? Because for me, I saw it disappointing because a lot of officers wouldn't take the opportunity to train in other ways other than pulling their weapon. Part two, though, is in those shootings, the buck is usually passed on to the cities in which they operate. And I've participated in some panels where they've talked about passing that liability on to the officers themselves, where they would have to carry some liability insurance like doctors do. Do you have any opinion for yourself about how that would work in police departments and these clearinghouses where they're going to try to have officers go through that they can't get fired from one job and go right to the next department and repeat that same behavior, costing the taxpayers and the community at large?
So to your first question, as far as the training, so there's not a special incentive for doing those additional trainings. We just, we have authorized training classes, that officers could go to. And so, when you talk about, less lethal, force, we have tasers, we have OC spray, we have the other tools that we carry. And so as a part of our annual training that we have to do is just going through all use of force training and what our options are. Now, one of the things that you will find, a lot of agencies don't do a lot of hand-to-hand combat training because the fear and the financial impact of officers getting hurt in that training. And now you got officers off in workman's comp issues. Like, the last department I worked at, man, it was almost an act of Congress to get us to have some real kind of physical fighting training, because we did it one year and everybody, oh man, they dislocated my shoulder. Oh man, I hurt my knee. And now you like, man, you got jokers that are just trying to take advantage of the system. And so as an administrator, that's something that you have to think about, when you're doing, these trainings and such. And so, you want to try to make sure you conduct them in as safe a manner as possible. But at the same time, man, all right, man, my people need to have the tools and the, the tactics that they need to be able to defend themselves, if that situation arises. And so, Yeah, not really an extra incentive. It's really normally just a part of the training platform, that we have, and what we see as to what we need to get officers experienced in.
So, sorry, go ahead, Chief. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So we, in my previous agency, when I was the chief outside of Charlotte, we did have a little bit of an incentive for training. If you wanted to get promoted to different levels in the police department, you had to achieve certain training. And if you didn't achieve that training, then you weren't even eligible for promotion. So you had to invest in yourself. And I tell young officers, you need to learn your craft. No matter what you do, I don't care if you dig a ditch, learn your craft to the best of your ability. Understanding your craft and law enforcement will save your life and the life of someone else. So we did put a few incentives on that training. In North Carolina, training is free. All of our community colleges offer law enforcement training. We have 2 justice academies here in the state where officers can go and train and stay on campus for free. So the fact that officers, and I've actually seen, I'm not going to that training. I ain't going to stay down there in the barracks for 3 days to get that training. Okay, well, don't expect to be promoted. I'll remind you that, because when you get promoted, you should be promoted to do more, not less. I want you to teach our younger officers to do more, not less, and learn this craft. So we did put a little bit of an incentive on training dealing with promotion.
All right, Mr. Nolan.
Excuse me, I just want to respond to Dory's question.
Wait,
Dory, in North Carolina, I'm on the Center for the Reduction and Use of Lethal Force Law Enforcement by executive order after the George Floyd murder, and that the state is trying to do active use of force. One recommendation is that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu be explored as supporting that for training for officers. It varies from agency to agency, but there are several agencies that embrace the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu system in providing that resource and support to officers, giving them allowances. So how to do that, and also hosting Gracie Jiu-Jitsu seminars. So law enforcement agents line is closely into it.
And to address your question about the qualified immunity and stripping that from officers and having officers, kind of do that on their own, you would never see that in the profession. I'm just going to be 100% real with you, because everybody would leave the profession if you try to go that route. And so really it's incumbent upon, now I'm a big advocate of national standards for law enforcement. And as we've already talked about here on this call is, all right, my city, we're under a federal consent decree. And so the things that I have to do, that we have to do, nobody else in this area has to do. There are only a few agencies in the country that are on these consent decrees that have these mandates from the federal government of how you will police. And so while it's great, all of the things that we're doing, in case in point, after George Floyd was killed, you started hearing all of this chatter around the country, ban chokeholds and these different restraints and the duty to intervene and all this other stuff. Man, I didn't bat an eye because I got all that stuff already, because I have federal oversight and it's mandated on us. But you can go right next door to the next city over and they don't have any of this stuff. And so, national standards will be a good way to get us there. But the qualified immunity component, man, if an officer is operating outside of their scope of authority by your policies, your practices, and your procedures, then they're not going to be covered. And that's, that's really what, how it should be in my personal opinion. And that, that works. Now, what you brought up about officers jumping ship, that is a big problem. Prime example, I fired an officer last year for excessive use of force incident. And that officer was able to go get another job at another agency in this area. And they didn't do a background check on him. Period, point blank. They did not do a background check on him. They never called me to inquire about that officer leaving this agency. So he got hired on there. Then what happened is that officer ended up getting federally indicted because of what he did here. Mm-hmm. And so that's just, you know, a testament to, you know, how big of a problem that is. And now, you know, I've been in a place here, I have those experiences. And so now, man, I'm able to sit at the table with lawmakers here in this state and share those things and talk about. Now, when we talk about reform and changing things through legislation, let me give you some examples of what happens. And these are the things that we need to attack. Qualified immunity, man, y'all, you're never going to get anywhere with that. OK, let me tell you what you can do that will make an impact and that will change things. And it's addressing issues like this. And that's where the importance of us getting into the profession and getting into these positions and having that voice to be able to share those things and highlight some of those problems and issues that, you know, that need to be addressed and that need to be addressed, you know, urgently.
Hey, Chief Armstrong, Chief, can I throw something right there? Chief Armstrong, you brought up a good point, too. And that's here's the point I'm going to make real quick. He's in Missouri. I'm in North Carolina. We do have an agency that oversees law enforcement in North Carolina. So agency hopping is a lot harder here. If you did something wrong here in North Carolina, let's say I fire an officer from NC Central and they try to go to Fayetteville PD. Well, after I fire you here, I send paperwork into the state that talks about why I fired you. So before you get your certification from this state agency in Fayetteville, they're going to investigate what I said to determine whether or not it's true. It's called North Carolina Training and Standards Division. And so every state has their different standards of how they do this background process in policing. And that is part of the national problem, is that there is no one standard of how police officers go from where and how and who and what. The second part is, when you talk about qualified immunity, I want to say this to everybody right quick. Listen, what we do when we got to put our hands on somebody is not pretty. I've been in situations where I've been on the ground fighting, holding my gun while bashing somebody's nose or trying to put their nose to their brain. You know why? Because it's a fight for life. When have you ever been in a fight and it looked like something you did a waltz to? Never. Fighting is not pretty. And so what we do is inherently dangerous at the end of the day. And like you said, there are protections in place. If you operate outside of these policies, you're already not protected.
Yeah, you're done.
But if I'm on a ground fighting, which I've been on too many occasions and broken glasses and just trying to keep my gun in the holster so the person who's trying to grab it doesn't get it, hey, it's all bets off. I'm telling you right now, I'm going home at the end of the day. That's the discussion we're going to have right there, is that tonight my son going to see me walk in the house. That's why I train and learn my craft. I tell the guys when we could foot tape, hey man, y'all might want to stop smoking, because one thing I do is know my craft. And I know my geographic area. I know how to do this job. But tonight when I go home, I'm going home. That's just the end of the discussion.
Good answer. So we have Mr. Nolan, and then we're going to Jordan. I want to say for time's we've been on for a while, so we want to get through by 8 o'clock. I want to respect everybody's time. I do feel like that's room for a round two later on, a few months out. So I would love to bring you guys back. So we'll go with Avery Nolan, and then we'll go to Jordan Jackson, and I'll let the panelists kind of wrap it up. And so to make sure everybody gets, you know, their time at home tonight. So Mr. Nolan, and then we'll go to Jordan Jackson.
Evening, gentlemen. I had a couple of questions, but for time's sake, I'm going to ask this one particularly because it kind of applies to myself and my own experience. So do you think that people will be less hostile or, I guess, rude, insulting, whatever to the police if they understood the reasoning behind the police work and how y'all do y'all job? The reason I ask that is because I don't know which of the panelists experienced it, but when I started working with the police, I saw what happens behind the badge. I went to the Law Enforcement Museum in my hometown, Washington, D.C., and I've actually done the simulation shooting simulator that people do for training. And I understand a lot better than a couple of years ago when everything started happening. It was on the media. So that's my question. If people knew more about what happens, why police do things, would they be less hostile and understand why y'all do y'all job the way y'all do?
And Nolan, the answer is 1000% yes. But I will expand on your question, and I'll go the opposite direction on it. Is, all right, man, if police officers had a better understanding of the communities that they served and the people in them, we wouldn't see some of the conflicts that we see play out in that. And so Dolan, what you just brought up, man, is not a police problem, man. It's a society problem, man. It is the problem that we are all facing. And so, man, it's incumbent upon all of us, man, to do a better job and to do our part in doing that. And, it's easy, it's easy being a minority, to blame, white people for stuff. And we hear that a lot. But at the same time, man, I can give you some examples of when, all right, man, a white person has been the person that has stood up for me or has had my back and different things like that. And, even having conversations with my father as an older, black man that lived through the civil rights thing, he can give me stories of being, experiencing racism, but he can also give me stories of, man, I worked for this white man and, man, he stayed on me because he saw something better for my life than what I saw for myself. And he wouldn't let me shortcut it. And so, man, I think if we all took the time to gain more understanding of each other, man, we wouldn't see, some of the conflict that we see. So yes, no, you bring up a great point. That absolutely would help things. And that's why we have to create more spaces like this, and more spaces in our communities where people can come, where we can come together and people, not have that fear of something bad happening to them, or have that fear of, man, I'm going to be ostracized because I say this or I say that. Man, we got to be open into hearing what people's experiences are and their perspectives, just to get a level of understanding. And to me, that is the biggest component of what we are facing and what we're dealing with right now. Is when I talk to people, man, I don't try to change their mind, man. And I've had plenty of people tell me that I wasn't worth anything because I'm a police officer, and that's cool. And so when we have that conversation, man, I'm not trying to change your mind, okay? But I'm just trying to get you to a certain place of understanding of, man, what it is that I do and why I chose, to do this profession, or why I continue to do this profession, or what I'm looking to do with being in the role that I'm in. And all I can do is just hope to give that person a certain level of understanding. And if we all had that, that mindset, man, as a society, we would be better than where we are right now. So great question, though.
All right, Jordan, and then we'll let the panelists wrap it up. Jordan Jackson.
Yeah, man. How you doing? My name is Jordan Jackson, first year student here at North Carolina Central. And my question was, is there any difficulty in not allowing your beliefs get in the way of your job, and not allowing your job get in the way of your beliefs or your morals?
Well, I can answer that one. Of course you struggle with some things because even in the law, it says you shall and you must in certain situations, right? Even when you're standing there and you're thinking, man, this is going to be unjust. This is not right. But ultimately, what I do is not personal. I have to trust the system to work. I have to do my job fairly. I've treated everybody equally. So no, I don't take anything personal. I've been cursed out. I've been called everything from a Uncle Tom to that Negro to the SOB. You name it, I've been called it. It ain't personal. Like Chief said earlier, it's not me they're targeting. They see the uniform. They're in the situation. I deal with people at their worst moment at times, and I recognize that. And my ultimate goal is to come on scene and hopefully try to de-escalate the situation, not make it worse. So got to kind of know me, but nothing really gets under my skin, except my 14-year-old son. But other than that, nothing really gets under my skin. So no, I don't let my beliefs or my personal feelings get involved in what I do every day.
And Jordan, real quick, I jump in. For me, man, I've learned how those two work together. And the way I explain it to people, man, is man, I've been Jason Armstrong my whole life, man. I've only been Chief Armstrong for a little bit. And so Chief Armstrong is not who I am, as an entire person. And so, man, I really, root myself in being a quality person. And so for me, man, that fuels me to be able to do this job, at a high level and to be good at it because, of the person that I strive to be outside of this. And yeah, man, there are difficult things that happen and difficult decisions that have to be made. But, man, I know, man, the decisions that I have to make do not come from a bad place. They don't come from a tainted place. And so even though I have to make tough decisions at times, man, I know the decisions that I'm making are rooted in the right things. And so, man, if you have that about yourself, you know, man, you can deal with the difficulties and the hardships, and it not be that much of a conflict for you, because at the end of the day, you know, man, I know who is watching what I'm doing, and that's who I'm trying to please, and it's the man upstairs. And so for me, you know, I don't look at it so much as a balancing act of one contradicting the other. Is, man, I let one fuels the other, and it's more of a partnership than anything else.
That's good stuff. That's good stuff. So I would say this. So I want to say, guys, I want to thank the panel. You guys gave us some great, knowledgeable information. You brought it from a brother's perspective, and I hope these students really learn that officers are your friends. You know, they have a job to do. Their job is to protect. Dr. Brown, I want to thank you for being on campus and training the next unit of soldiers to go out here. Doctors, lawyers, police chiefs, you know, all that. You know, you're doing the real hands-on work within the classroom. And you guys out here, both of you guys are chiefs, man, to see black men in these leadership positions, man. That gives us hope that, you know, with this even being Black History Month, that we're doing great things and we're doing things as black men. And I just wanted to show these other young men who are on the call that when you put your foot first and you do what you got to do, you can get to that destination. So again, thank you guys for being here tonight. So I want you guys to, I'm going to start with Dr. Brown. And Dr. Brown, I've been saying Mr. Brown all night, so charge it to my head and not my heart. You know, we just good. And so I want you to give these young men something that you can leave them with tonight that they can take back and think about their own personal life. It could be about the topic we talked about here. It could be about something that's on your heart. And so I'll start with Dr. Brown. We'll go to Mr. Armstrong and then Mr. Williams, and then we'll wrap this thing up. So anything that's on your heart that you can tell these students.
If you're in this panel, if you're watching this, matter, you probably are studying and knowledge to advance yourself. Understand that you can be a part of the solution. I think it is awesome that you're able to hear from two chiefs from different backgrounds, but you're also hearing from two black men who have used their education and their character to get to where they are. I think that something that Chief Armstrong talked about, hey, you can train me. You can be trained. You can take classes. You can earn degrees and credentials. But in the end, it still breaks down to who are you and what are you trying to do with your life. Understand that this is an important step that you're taking by earning your degree. You can work within the system. Some of you researcher. What's going on in some of you working right on the line and working the streets is right where you should be. And for some of you, you should be in somebody's building and be the one that Chief Armstrong or Chief Williams has to talk to get authorization to do something. You have that potential. Someone like me, someone like Dr. Heath, we're here on this campus to help you get there. Use us.
Good. Perfectly stated, brother. Mr. Armstrong, and then we'll go to Mr. Williams. I think you're muted.
Man, the only thing that I want to highlight is knowledge is power. And that is the biggest part of what I do. Yeah, I may have weapons and all this other stuff, but the knowledge is what has been the number one thing to get me to where I am today. And knowledge comes in many different forms. You know, college isn't for everybody, okay? But knowledge is for everybody. And you control, man, the knowledge that you get and where you get your knowledge from. And so I always encourage young people to make sure that you stay informed and make sure that you know what's going on and that you continuously feed yourself, knowledge on things that you're interested in or things that you want a deeper understanding of. because ultimately, you know, man, that knowledge could be impactful for you in whatever you go on to do, you know, in your future. And so, you know, stay committed to learning and stay committed, you know, to gaining just knowledge on whatever it is that interests you, because that's what's going to be the primary thing to take you far in whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, I'll say this: if a poor boy from Baltimore and Rayford, North Carolina, who hated the police, disgusted about everything that law enforcement stands for, can grow up and become a police officer, all because some good law enforcement officers changed his mind. You know what you can do? It's amazing. It would be amazing what you can do if you decide to choose this field. If you decide to become a police officer and set the course to change someone else's life, hey, I encourage you to come into this field. Those are the people we're looking for. I pride myself on being a guardian. I pride myself on doing everything I can to help my fellow brother or sister of any race come forward. You know, before, a lot of people don't know this, but before I was in law enforcement, I was in education. And my going saying was education is the key to success. It doesn't guarantee you success, but it is the key to the door. The poor boy from Rayford has gone on to become the police chief of 4 major cities and the North Carolina Central University. So if it's possible for me, imagine what's possible for you. So I'm honored to say that the things that are happening right now in this career will make this career better than when I came in. This career is going to be so much better for the next generation of officer than it was when I came in, you know, almost 16, 17 years ago. So I'm honored to be a part of the panel. Look, guys, I encourage you to do whatever your heart desires, whatever's going to make you happy in life, as long as you are helping someone else. Don't forget to always offer that hand back to help your fellow brother or sister up. Those are my words of encouragement. Wish you guys.
Hey, and I just want to throw in one last point. And man, a big key to life is when you can't hold grudges. Because Chief Williams probably don't know this or remember this, but he didn't give me a job one time.
What?
And I don't hold a grudge against him for it.
Hey, sometimes you don't get the jobs and another door open up on the road. So you might get So I want to say, guys, this is great. Like, this is better than what I imagined. Like I said, I know sometimes you see community and police, they get in here and they rag, why you doing this? That's what this is not about. You know, the thing about me, I'm all about building a better man. And so what I'm doing in the ministry is trying to bring these young kids tools. So when they graduate, I want a toolbox with a lot of tools. And I don't want to be the only black male that gives them knowledge, right? I don't want to be the end all be all, because all you young men have different ways in life that you came from, that you care, that I feel like they can get you. So I want to thank everybody tonight. Thanks for the panel. These students, they want a part 2. So I'll be emailing y'all something down the line a couple months from now, but maybe we can dive into videos of some things that happen. You can explain what you would do in a situation or something. We can make it more interactive. But once again, thank you guys. Tell your wives and families. I thank them for giving you the time tonight. I know we take away from your family time. So tell them thank you for letting you spend some time with us tonight. So thank you guys, man. Enjoy your night.
Absolutely, man.
Appreciate you.
I just want to say thank you for the experience, and I hope y'all have a good night.